So welcome back to day 2, Tuesday, January 12th. I'm going to give a really brief introduction to where we are, and then I will introduce today's speaker. Welcome also everybody in class today. So yesterday, Carmen Fernholz laid some very basic groundwork, some of the general philosophical and perspective shifts that's necessary when thinking about doing organic grain production, and how to start to deal with some of the long list of challenges that he identified. And so from that general groundwork, we're going to today start to go into some of the more practical nuts and bolts of how to do this. And of the many things we could have started with how to actually grow the grain, how to do weed control, how to do fertility management. We thought it was important to start with marketing, because if you don't have a market for your grain, there's not much use in learning how to grow it. And so it was recommended by many people we talked to that were advising us in building this curriculum that marketing was really one of the most important things to jump into as quick as possible. And so from here on out, it will be the nuts and bolts. It won't be everything that you need to know to start growing, obviously, but it will be many tips of many icebergs. And it will give you information on where to look for more information, who to ask questions to, and which directions to generally head. So that's the general kind of where we are today. And what we're going to be talking about today is day 1 of organic grain marketing with John Bobbe. And so John is the executive director of the Organic Farmers Agency for Relationship Marketing, or OFARM, and he's going to tell you a lot more about what that is and what services they provide. He has his master's in ag econ and has taught that subject at college level for many years. And he and his wife also own a 3rd-generation Wisconsin family farm. And so I'm going to give the floor to him in just a minute, but I wanted to let everybody know that is online that as he's talking, if you have questions that come up, you can type them in into the chat room on the lower left-hand corner, and I'll just kind of track those, and if something is really pertinent to what he's talking about then, maybe I'll ask it for a point of clarification. Otherwise, I'm going to be loading those up for the very end for the discussion that's happening. Same with people in class. If you have questions, write them down. We'll have a lot of time for discussion at the end. And if you also are having issues hearing or seeing, please also write that into the chat room. I'll be monitoring as well. So without further ado, John Bobbe.
Thank you for inviting me here. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what the organic market looks like. We deal, and I'll talk a little bit more about OFARM, but we deal in organic row crops and some forages and organic grass-fed beef with the group in Montana. And if you want to look it up, our website for our organization is ofarm.org or ofarm.coop. Either one will get you to the same place. Let me talk about what the organic market looks like. I recently had the opportunity to listen to Errol Schweitzer, who is the executive global grocery coordinator at Whole Foods Market. Now, Whole Foods is a multi-billion-dollar industry-leading retailer with 400 stores. Their sales are about $13 billion a year. And here's what he says. It's his job to find out what consumers want. Consumers are demanding more information about the product's ingredient list, what's in it when they pick up a package in the store, and it's important for them in their business to accentuate as much what's not in the product as what is, and to prove the commitment to product safety by enforcing and publicizing strict internal standards. Now, from 2010 to 2014, the sale of non-genetically engineered products increased over 400%. Conventional food, the demand has been pretty flat at about 2.5% a year. And the organic sector of this, which would include, which is also non-GMO, would be growing. It's been growing at about 20% a year. So either way, conventional food is pretty well flat. And Mr. Schweitzer concluded that organic is the future of agriculture and there is no other trend. Now, the industry on the buy side is beginning to look a lot like the conventional side of agriculture. Here are some familiar names. Costco, $13 billion in organic products per year. Walmart, $13 billion worth of products, and I mentioned Whole Foods. And there's some other names that are coming in. Are any of these names familiar? General Mills with Small Planet Foods, Pepsi, Coke, Cargill, Bunge being one of the biggest grain handlers in the world, all have organic lines of some kind. So it was interesting because Costco recently interviewed in their magazine their top 2 people that procure for organic in the Costco stores. And the question was, what are the challenges in sourcing quality organic items? And their response was, the biggest thing is making sure we have a constant, consistent supply of organic ingredients. I want you to remember that as we go. Now, let me back up a little bit and talk about what it takes to consider transitioning to organic, which will give you a little bit better picture of why organic is a growing sector, the fastest growing sector of U.S. agriculture. First of all, some things to consider is management. It is not prescription farming like conventional agriculture, where you call up your agronomist and you read the formula and you add so many gallons of water to the spray, dump so many containers of spray in, and you go out and spray it. It doesn't work. It's not allowed. It requires more paperwork, and as a matter of fact, it requires whole farm planning, because the third point is it requires a crop rotation. You cannot just grow consistently corn and soybeans, corn and soybeans. It's got to have a small grain and a forage in it besides. And the consideration becomes, how are you going to market those other things besides the corn and the beans? It requires that you be certified, have an on-farm inspection, and have hire a certification agency approved by the USDA. And Harriet Behar, that'll be here later this week, is going to go into more detail about that. And one of the big issues in organic today is taking measures to keep your crops free of GMO contamination. Some of these pollens in corn can drift up to 3 miles. So you may be perfectly safe. It requires buffer strips in your farm plan to keep it, to try and minimize the chance of contamination. But contamination is one of the biggest, most costly things for organic producers at this point. Now, the organic grain market that producers sell into is unique. It is unlike anything that you're going to ever run into in any conventional agriculture, for a couple of reasons. First of all, to date, there is no futures market. You can't look it up on the Chicago Board of Trade. The USDA publishes some grain prices, but only every 2 weeks at best. So if you take the USDA's prices, you could be 2 weeks out of date if the market is moving up, which if you're selling, have something to sell, you're going to want to be in tune with what the current market is. And the third thing is finding buyers and knowing what price to ask is a big challenge for anyone who has been in organic farming for any length of time, much less someone that's starting out. And that's one of the key differences compared to conventional, where you basically take what shows up in the mailbox, as far as whether it be the milk check or the check for the cattle you sold or something. It is a price asking business on behalf of farmers. And how do you know what price to ask so that you can maximize the dollars out of the marketplace? Now, if you're going to do your own marketing, and some farmers do, but most of the farmers within Old Farm figure it is not something they want to do. Carmen Fernholz, that talked to you yesterday, states that you can figure 15 to 20% of your time each week to spend on marketing if you do it yourself. Now, if you're trying to get the crops planted, cultivated, or harvested, do you have one day a week that you can spend on locating markets and buyers and making decisions about where that crop should go? Or if you're going to turn it over to an agent. Now, nothing in organic is rarely ever done in organic marketing without some type of contract. It may be verbal, but most cases it's going to be some written form, whether it be an email, whether it be a formally signed contract. Now, there is a whole book written about organic contracts, and it's the Farmer's Legal Action Guide, Organic Contracts. You'll actually find a chapter in here about Old Farm for a specific reason, and that is that we write a lot of the contracts for our farmers. And you can find this online if you do a Google for Farmers Legal Action Group and the Farmer's Guide to Organic Contracts, and actually you can download the whole booklet if you want. And no matter what commodity, it covers dairy and the other commodities as well. But they cite 7 rules for contracting organic grain. And rule number 1, the contract almost always favors the party who wrote it. So the question you face as a producer of organic grain is, are you going to be the one to find a way to write the contract and know what should be the terms for payment, delivery, and so on? Or are you simply going to take what somebody from the industry that wants to buy your grain hands you? If you take the one that somebody from the industry hands you, guess whose favor it's going to be written in favor of? And I can almost guarantee it's not going to be in your favor. Now, there are all kinds of mistakes that over the years, and I've been at this about 15 years now, that farmers make in organic grain marketing. And I'm not going to cover all of them, but just to give you an example. First of all, believing that marketing costs nothing or that someone will do it for you for nothing. And marketing costs money, and I'll show you what the costs are throughout our Old Farm cooperatives here in just a minute. Second of all is not negotiating for your costs, including the time for marketing. Delivery across straight lines can become an issue. Now, the state of Wisconsin has some pretty strict grain dealer licensing and bonding requirements. But if you ship it to Illinois, you got to be careful because they may not get all excited about running down your money because you're from Wisconsin and not from Illinois. And so you want to be careful about who you sell to. And I'm not saying don't sell across state lines. It's just a caution. And the same thing if you're selling cattle across state lines. And the last one is that if you deal with the food grade market in organic right now, chances are the buyer is going to test it for genetic contamination. And those tests, they have what they call a strip test. The easiest thing I can relate to would be, it's almost like a home pregnancy test where they take a sample of grain, they grind it up, they add some liquids to it and pour it on a strip. And depending on how significant the color is of that strip is whether there's some genetic contamination or not. Now, it's not foolproof, but the regular test, the chemical test, costs between $300 and $400. And who's going to pay for that? And if your load of grain, if you shipped it and it's sitting on the scale and it comes back that it is contaminated with genetically engineered genes or genetic material, who's going to take care of that problem for you? In some cases, the buyer may have a dual facility and simply ship it over to conventional. You know what that difference is right now? $3 on conventional corn versus about $9 or $10 on organic corn. On the other hand, if you have somebody that knows what to do, and the trucker is going to be upset too because he wants to get on with his next load, how do you salvage that to get the most money out of it, because it can go in all likelihood to the feed market at this point. And always remember this, a buyer's job description is to purchase at the lowest possible price possible. It's what they get paid to do. I'm not saying they're bad guys or anything like that, but it's their job. It's just like when your dad or mother sends you out to buy a part for the farm, that they don't generally send you out to buy the most expensive part that you can buy. They send you out to buy one that will do the job. And it's the same thing with grain sales or livestock sales. So a question that's often asked, and my good friend Charlie Johnson in South Dakota, and you'll see one of the videos in that series that you saw at the beginning, he's on that video. Johnson Farms is 2,800 acres in South Dakota, all organic. It's been organic since the 1970s. And his point is this: if a professional athlete or an actor employs an agent, why shouldn't you? And Johnson Farms employs the gentleman that'll talk to you tomorrow, Tim Ennis, for that. So what are some considerations if you're not going to do your marketing yourself, or you don't want to do it? And don't get me wrong, there are farmers that thrive on going out there and mixing it up in the marketplace and do a very good job. But a lot of them, they want to stick to their tractors, machinery repair, their cultivators, and so on. Just get me a good price when that load goes down the road. First of all, what are the considerations in hiring an agent? First of all, what do you have to sell? And what can you contract? Do you have corn? Do you have hay? Do you have oats? There's any number of different crops that are available for that. How much volume do you have? Do you have a semi-load, several semi-loads, a lot of semi-loads? Is it only enough for a straight truck? What if that buyer is several hundred miles away? Are you going to get in the truck, on a straight truck, and drive it there? It becomes uneconomical, logistical wise. But what some of our cooperatives can do is, you've got a farmer or two that have partial loads, they can put them together and save the freight, among other things. The third point is, how can you protect yourself if something goes wrong? I've already mentioned the problem with GMO contamination. What happens if you get it to, right now this year, a big problem in organic wheat was vomitoxin. And if it's over so many parts per million, it creates a problem because it can't be used for the feed market and it can't be used for some kinds of livestock. There are some things that can be done that can make it more saleable, even upgrading it to food grade in some cases, or aflatoxin or one of the other toxins. And who's going to deal with that if the load gets to the buyer and there's a problem with the load? Now, if you hire an agent, you're probably going to get a call, but the agent is going to be able to help you through what are the best options for a bad situation. And the fourth thing, which everybody wants, is getting you paid as rapidly as possible. When you sign a contract, when are you going to be paid? Will you be paid in full? Will it be in a timely manner? In some cases, I think the average turnaround is about, Harry, about 20 days, something like that, could be, but it can stretch out to 30, 60, or 90 days. If you got a tax bill due at the end of January, you should have shipped it in December to be able to pay the bills. And so those are all things that you want to understand and discuss if you hire an agent, and if you don't hire an agent, you're going to have to do it for yourself to think of all of these things. So what does it cost? Within the old farm cooperatives, the range is from 5.5% to 6.5% of the gross sales. And remember this, if you're writing the check, the agent works for you. If someone tells you that there is no cost, I'd walk away from it, because there are costs, and somehow they're going to get them out of the marketplace. So if it costs 5.5% to 6.5%, where do you get that money from? Well, in the case of the old farm member organizations, what most of the marketers do, not in every case, but in the majority of cases, they tack that on to the price to the buyer, that the buyer pays your cost of marketing. Not always, but in a lot of cases, which is unlike conventional agriculture, where they just take it off of your check. So what about Old Farm? What is our mission statement? We are a cooperative incorporated in the state of Minnesota, and we are a marketing agency in common. And I'll show you, we have 6 cooperatives that are members, all organic producers. But the work of Old Farm is to coordinate the efforts of producer marketing groups to protect and strengthen the market for organic grain, hay, and livestock products. And this is inside the blue line is the area of the 19 states where Old Farm operates. In Montana is the Montana Organic Producers Co-op. They have producers that have grain, but mostly they concentrate on semi-loads of organic grass-fed beef, which is a specific market. You've got Kansas Organic Producers, which Harry works for here, and they market for producers all the way from South Dakota on through Texas and Louisiana and in between. You've got NF Organics, where Tim is going to talk to you. Those are all scattered all through the states that you see there. Up in Minnesota, that's the Minnesota Buckwheat Growers Association. They actually have a feed mill. They can do all kinds of dehulling and light processing in addition. And one of the more interesting contracts that they've had, what would you think it would be for food? How about people that want to feed their pets organic pet food? They've had some very significant contracts in the past for organic pet food. Seems crazy to you, but if the price is good, why wouldn't you supply it to them? You've got here in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Organic Marketing Alliance, and then you've got Midwest Organic Farmers Co-op, which is headquartered in Illinois, but has members in Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee. We've been incorporated since 2005. The organization came into being in 2001, and the reason it came into being because organic prices were low and dropping further, and farmers came together in 2 meetings in Ames, Iowa, which I helped facilitate, and from there the idea of these co-ops getting together came into being as the Old Farm is the umbrella. Each one of these co-ops nominates members to our board of directors in Old Farm. And what do? Each one of them has a marketer, and on the first and the third Thursdays of every month, they get together at 7 a.m. most of the time, winter months 8, and they talk about weather conditions in this 19-state area, contracts, prices, who's got what in inventory, who are the good players in the industry, who are the bad actors, people that don't pay or are late in paying, delivery problems, all those kinds of things on those calls. And our right to do that is guaranteed by the Capper-Volstead Act of 1922, that actually farmers, including conventional farmers, can get together and legally set prices. This is one of the few times that farmers, organic farmers, have gotten together and used that right. Now, what do? We promote the exchange of pricing, contracts, and marketing information. The livestock people get together once a month on their calls. We facilitate negotiations and terms of the contracts. In many cases, our marketers write the terms of the contracts. That means that they're employed by the organic producers. That means that the contracts are generally going to be in favor of the producer and not the buyer. We try to educate policymakers such as legislators, and we assist organic farmers with the adoption of new crops and agronomic practices. What's new on the horizon? What are our pricing goals? The full recovery of all input costs for grain and livestock. And these were developed by organic farmers about what kind of price they need in order to continue to be a part of their communities and stay in business. A return to labor and management that provides adequate family income, an adequate return to investment, income enhancement to provide for community support for schools and churches and infrastructure, and an organic premium for the production of healthy, wholesome food that is environmentally responsible. Your parents, that they spent all that lifetime working to build up the equity in that farm, shouldn't have to give the farm away for you to have it. You should be able to have an adequate income that you should be able to pay your parents adequately for buying the farm and for you to have a way of life. And that's the feeling of our organic producers, which is different than some of the approaches taken where you practically have to give the farm away on the conventional side. Let's see, we got to get up here. There. So, how have we done? This was in the 2012 Rural Cooperatives magazine from USDA, where an organic federation is seen as a strategy for family farm survival and regional competitiveness. And Dr. Gray cites a study by Clarkson University authors Richard Welch and Amy Guptill, which concluded this, that OFARM is the largest single block of producers growing organic field crops in North America, those 6 crops, or 6 cooperatives. In many cases, we write the terms of the contracts. And what's the advantage to farmers? A study done by Iowa State University shows that prices received by OFARM member farmers can be 22 to 24% higher than those farmers who go to the marketplace alone. So, what are some key words to our success? There's 2 words: relationships, farmers collaborating with each other to make the cooperative work, and the farmer to the buyer, that farmers are reliable suppliers of what the buyer wants, and trust, maintaining organic integrity with consumers, and we come down on the side of strict enforcement of high organic standards. We mentioned the organic, the real natural, the videos, and Anders is going to play some more of them. They'll be available for you. And let me see, let me go up here where it makes it shift. And you can find us here on ofarm.coop or ofarm.org, either one. You can like us on Facebook at Organic Farmers Agency for Relationship Marketing. And the videos that you see are organic, the real natural. And on this last website up here, I would encourage you to take a look at Dr. Richard Levin's address to the Minnesota Organic Farming Conference last Saturday, where the title of his presentations comes up right on top, is that organic is the future. So with that, I think we can, I have also written a book here. Anders has several copies for your reference. A Farmer's Guide to Grain Marketing, and I think that's it. And then
you can turn the camera back on, and you can take questions if you.
Okay, and I'm going to ask Harry to come up for a few minutes. Harry Bennett is a marketer for Kansas Organic Producers, one of our member co-ops. He actually lives here in Madison, but we have no facilities. Old Farm is a virtual cooperative. It's all done by the internet and things. And Harry has handled one of the largest accounts for organic wheat for flour. And right now, we actually have a few contracts signed for the 2016 crop for corn, where the corn isn't even in the ground yet. So that farmer knows what that price is going to be before he even plants it. So Harry, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, I would just, our co-op is basically, like John
Why
said,
don't you stand away so they can see it?
we're in Kansas, eastern Colorado, almost all of Nebraska. We go up into South Dakota and Oklahoma, and then down into the Texas Panhandle. And we have a customer base that spreads all over the country. Our primary milling customers is mills in the Front Range, Colorado, and in western North Carolina. And a lot of our wheat goes into the King Arthur premium flour, organic flours. So, and we basically this year we had about 150,000 bushels of high protein organic wheat in our inventory, and it's all committed. And then we're in the process of, and of course this is hard red winter wheat, which was sown in September, October, and then it's harvested in early summer, and then it's ready to market usually after a sweat period in July, August. So we're actively selling forwards on wheat with act of God clauses in all contracts. If Mother Nature decides you're not going to grow wheat this year, you're not obligated to fill any trucks. So, but just as a price point, we reached a high in 2014 crop. We had a real problem, drought in our production area. We were selling the high protein wheat. By definition, high protein organic wheat is 13% or more on the protein scale. And then it has to meet a test weight of 60 pounds, and usually on a falling number at least above 250, and we don't have any difficulties there. And then of course no vomitoxin or any of those problems. And wheat of that nature was gaining a $21 price. The 15 crop was good. We had adequate moisture, everything worked out. The price retreated back to a $19 price. And our forward price this year is we're trying to hold at a $19 a bushel price. So if you look at the conventional price today on the Board of Trade, you would see that we're quite a bit ahead of that price. To produce high protein wheat requires a commitment on the farmer's part. It usually involves foliar sprays with accepted fertilizers, usually fish emulsion, seaweed sprays. You have to get a fertility program, and then you want moisture but not too much, and you want some heat but not too much. So anyway, and of course we sell a whole gamut of things, and one of the interesting things that we're doing right now in our grower group is we're helping our farmers. Many of our farmers tap the Ogallala Aquifer, which runs from the Dakotas clear down to the Texas Panhandle. Well, if you have heard, the Ogallala Aquifer is in its last days. In western Kansas, where it's a little more shallow, we're going to lose our irrigation potential out there for all the acres in probably the next 5 to 10 years. So we're in a process of identifying dryland crops that our farmers can grow. And then of course, if you grow it, we want to sell it. So we have to develop. And so right now we're trying to actively develop markets for proso millet. And there's peas, field peas that are in the northern parts of our production area that are a good fit. And grain sorghums, which requires a lot less water than corn. So that's another service that and it's driven by our co-op wants to survive, and one of the survival tactics is we have to develop a cropping system that's not as dependent on irrigated water. So anyway, that's kind of what I do, or what I did. I'm actually in the retirement mode these days, and helping the organization with some new marketers and training and such. So.
Thank you. So we can open it up for questions, John. What's your?
I might add that the size of the farms we deal with generally the commercial sized. Organic farm is anywhere from 100 acres on up to several thousand acres. So, yes, ma'am.
Can you explain why you think the price of organic crops, maybe even milk, like I'm a dairy farmer, why is it so much more expensive? Like you get a higher premium and stuff than conventional, you know, like the $19 versus the $3 that conventional is getting.
Well,
And can you repeat the question, John, for the viewers?
yeah, the question is, why is our organic prices much higher? Is that basic question? A couple of reasons. One would be that the demand is there, that
So if you're trying to get everyone to convert to organic, wouldn't the price go down drastically?
If it's done wrong, probably, but if it's done right, probably not. Right now, that's not the case. With the foreseeable future, it's going to continue to grow at about 20% a year. We had a little hiccup back in 2008 when people's incomes were dropping because of the deep recession. The second thing that goes with it is what it costs to produce, and that goes to those 5 factors that I mentioned. And whether it's a grain farm or a dairy farm is going to have even more capital invested than some of the grain farms. And farmers need to be thinking in terms of what does it cost to produce. How do I recover that from the marketplace? And there's a whole host of new products that are coming on the line that all these big companies and some smaller ones are coming along with, that consumers actually want. And right now, if we didn't deal with right now they're importing to solve the problem, but if we could produce it, I think they'll buy it, what we've got to produce. If everybody was organic, there is some yield drag, for instance, in grains. Corn, they generally plant 2 weeks later, so it doesn't pollinate at the same time to reduce the GMO contamination. But generally, some of the farm records show that organic crops can compete very, very favorably with the yields that our producers get for the price.
You know, I would just add that one of the things that we say in our cooperative is that the pricing structure is really, we're trying to equate to what would be a living wage for farming. You know, you hear the living wage argument, and basically what that means is that we're trying through our pricing structure to cover the costs that it costs to grow food without, you know, synthetic additions and chemicals and such as that. Very clean food, and do a rotation. Like you grow $19 wheat, all those acres have to do something else in the next season. You have to have a farm plan. So a lot of it you have to gain. And what we're trying to do is figure out a pricing structure and an agriculture system that would allow a young farmer to maybe borrow some money and then have a pricing structure that would allow the payback. And I would challenge anybody to look at conventional agriculture prices, board prices, and the costs of production land and make that pencil out. It just doesn't work. You can start with organic prices though, you can make a case for it.
All right, we have a question online. So I'm gonna come in here real quick and I'll tell talk for a minute. The question is, there's not a CBOT future marketing. but if there is fluctuations in the market, organic crop price is affected by that. Is that correlated with conventional, and how can you use DBOT as a proxy?
Our farmers have made a conscious decision that they went away from conventional agriculture because they didn't want to play that game. There have been buyers that would like to tie organic prices to the Chicago Board of Trade, and we have steadfastly resisted that because the Chicago Board of Trade is a bunch of paper trading. Very little of it is actual delivery or indicative of what the market actually is, and in no way is indicative of what the crop is worth in organic. And as the president of Old Farm makes the point, that did it cost you any less this year to raise the crop than it did the year before? Then if it cost you the same or more because your inputs went up, why should you receive less by somebody else out there doing a bunch of paper trading?
Okay. I'm going to read questions here so we don't have the double talk. One more question from online, and that is, can organic producers utilize traditional crop insurance products?
Actually, there are special crop insurance products designed for organic producers. When it first came out, one of the problems was that it did not reflect organic prices in that. Now, there are some stipulations, but a crop insurance agent would be able to know or research that as to how to tie in the higher risk that organic crops so that you would get somewhat of a higher price built in. I don't know, there's a formula that they plug into that, but crop insurance is available for organic crops.
It's actually a brand new program too, and that I'm not that familiar with, whole farm revenue insurance, which I hear is a great option for even your grain farmers that may be marketing 3 to 4 different crops. It's something, I know there's a few webinars out about it. It's called whole farm revenue insurance. I'm sure you know more about it.
He can fix it, I'm sure.
Yep. So can you speak to that at all, what Aaron just said? Because the people online weren't able to hear.
Well, I'm not an expert on crop insurance. I don't know how much you know about it, Harry. There are some people that do utilize it, and it's a matter of knowing. Some cases they have had some pilot programs in states, and it's a matter of knowing what state you live in as to what the rules and regulations are for that particular state. So the best thing I can tell you is that whether it be whole revenue, I've seen some things about some of the caveats of whole revenue as to whether it's you should use the county average or another average and so on. And an insurance agent that sells crop insurance would be better versed to do that, or if you can find an organic producer in your area that insures his crops or as organic, to know exactly what your neighbor is doing. Organic farmers are great people to share information with.
Any questions from the class? Go for it.
This kind of relates to the transition years. I'm putting my farm into transition to organic this year. Right now, the rotation is basically corn, beans, and I want to change it to corn, beans, probably wheat, then alfalfa. My specific question is, I've got some neighboring dairy farmers that I think I could produce for, but particularly, they're not going to be interested in paying an organic price since they're not going to be converting their organics, but I'm concerned about surviving the 3 transition years. Do you have any advice as I'm talking to these dairy farmers how I can market most effectively my alfalfa acres to them?
Can you repeat that question again? Or general part of that question.
It's a good question. The question is whether or not you will be able to extract any kind of a premium because it's a transition or not. That's the big thing. There is a market out here in some cases for transitional grains, but that's one of the choke points right now is the markets. You might, for instance, on corn, you might be able to get to the right market, 50 cents, maybe at a stretch $1 more for transitional.
Yeah, beans about $1.50.
Kind of thing on those crops. But now there is some glimmer of hope here. When I talk about what's going on in North Dakota, doesn't help here in Wisconsin, but there is an entire facility in North Dakota, million bushel capacity elevator that some people bought, and it's going to concentrate on non-GMO crops. The only reason I make that point is that if that is a success, I think you're going to see more of that down the road. But there might be a little bit for your corn and beans. I don't know, wheat you wouldn't have a problem with. It's transitional wheat, but there's no GE in wheat unless Monsanto or Syngenta snuck it in, which they've tried to do. And alfalfa hay is going to be alfalfa hay.
Yeah, it's one of those problems that dairies have addressed it to a degree. I know Organic Valley had a program. We worked very closely with Organic Valley for about 4 or 5 years in development of dairies down in Texas, and they had a program where they were taking the milk during the transition, the 3-year transition period, and they were buying it at a premium price, and then of course they were offloading it into the conventional stream, and they were doing that on the commitment of the dairy that they would become an organic producer for Organic Valley. And so on the strength of that, they would help to carry the farmer somewhat during the transition period. And you know, you can kind of, if you start dreaming out loud, that would be something as our industry matures on the grain side, that maybe we could have a transition grains market using maybe the non-GMO appeal and such, that for that 3 years we could get you a little bit more, but it's just one of those rough spots that's part of the organic. The transition is part, it's codified in the rules, and it's one of those things, and you know, you can do a little bit depending on, you know, your history of your farm. You can kind of sometimes get that using winter wheat or something, get a little bit of a break on your transition, but normally it's that 3 seasons, and it's one of the tough things.
We got a question from a short course student that I want to get exactly take off in a minute.
I was just going to ask what the numbers were like from organic to conventional, like the bushels per acre. I was wondering what the...
Repeat the question real quick.
Yeah, what the difference between organic and conventional is.
I guess it depends on where you are.
Well, it's going to depend on where you are. There are seed corn companies, Albert Lee, Blue River Hybrids, a number of others, that are specifically developing lines of seed grain for organic. Organic is an entirely different ballgame, that you just can't go to a university seed plot under the same conditions to expect you're going to get some comparable results. But you are going to get some yield drag because of a little bit later planting. It could be 25 bushel to the acre or more. But on the other hand, hopefully the price should make up for that yield drag difference. And you're going to be planting later for a couple of reasons. One is weed control, to let that first generation of weeds come up and get them before you get the crop in. It's warmer, so the crop germinates a lot faster, so you can get out there with a cultivator on the row crops. And the other thing is, when you get to pollination, that hopefully conventional corn that your neighbors are growing is done pollinating by the time that yours is ready to pollinate, so you don't get that cross-contamination. But 2 years ago, even though organic producers planted 2 weeks later, they pollinated at the same time, and it caused all kinds of problems in the organic market with rejected loads of grain. So it's hard to tell exactly what that yield drag might be. The biggest restriction is going to be on nitrogen fertilizers, and that's where crop rotation comes in. Good crop rotations, and a lot of farmers, you can use manure even from a conventional farm, but you need to check with your certifier before you do that. The other one has been compost. A lot of these big chicken farms, organic producers have been using compost, and green manure crops are helpful too.
I would comment on, since organic hard red winter wheat is one of our primary crops, there is very little yield give up. I mean, it's basically dependent on your fertility program, because it's one of those unique crops. It's planted in the fall, harvested in the spring. Weed competition isn't huge in that, and depending on your fertility program, there's very little difference between a conventional and an organic farmer. We have farmers in western Kansas that are, fence row neighbors on irrigated acres that don't give up hardly any acres in irrigated corn production. Now, they planted a little lower population, and they have a higher expense because they do hire some hand weeding. But the other thing is, they're long-term farmers. They've really been at this, and they always refer to the weed seed bank, and they've been able to keep their weed competition at a real low level, and that's very critical on row crop. Is how good are you at keeping your weeds down?
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. If short course students need to leave, you guys can take off. Thanks for staying. Also, in terms of fertility, as was just mentioned, Mark Kopetsky from Organic Valley is going to be talking this Friday, so he'll be covering a lot of that. So short course students are leaving now, but we have a few more questions online. And one, I think, was a follow-up to utilizing crop insurance products. They also asked, on forward contracts, what % of expected yield do you suggest farmers contract, or does the act of God statement cover potential yield shortages?
Generally, what we suggest is that you put a portion of your farm or your acreage in a forward contract, whatever you feel comfortable with. Heaven forbid, don't do the whole thing on one forward contract. That maybe you would do 5% or 10% of it. At least you know what that is, and that will help you determine what the price hopefully should be from there on out.
Okay. I think we have at least one more question, and that is, how does a person go about locating the best agent to work with in their local area?
If you're looking at cooperative like O-Farm, you can go to our website, ofarm.coop, and there's a list under member organizations of the marketers. And if that marketer can't do anything for you, doesn't feel comfortable doing it for you, they'll refer you to somebody else within the network.
Okay. I think we might have one more question at the bottom. Or it was a comment, and that is the USDA, in response to an earlier question, the USDA is working through the PVP to develop a transitional label. Clarkson Grain is involved in working to offer this as a way to assist farmers in the transition years. So that is maybe some more of the bright spot you're talking about.
Yeah, and actually we in O-Farm have a trademark, Sustainable Transition Verified, and we're going to be working over the coming months with developing that. What we want to do is involve the certifiers. What a farmer would do, and we need to talk with some of the certification agencies, is that from year one that they make that decision to start transitioning, that program would help them with not only a market for that year one grain, but also the paperwork, so that they get accustomed that by the third year they're pretty well into the routine of what the inspection entails, what's involved with the paperwork and so on. So yes, we do have that. We just have to develop it more. We're just waiting word from the trademark office.
Okay, great. We had another question in class.
Just a comment on the price differential. I think a lot of people would argue that conventional pricing is not carrying the freight. It's not carrying an environmental and/or a return to environmental and social capital. So that's part of the reason for the price differential is that the organic is trying to move more toward a full cost pricing model where the return to the environmental capital and the social capital are part of the price that you receive, not just your economic capital.
Yep, absolutely.
Any more questions from the online community or from the class?
What's the cost difference from producing an organic crop from a conventional? Because how much it's going to cost you to produce conventional crops compared to the organic?
Question is the cost of production for organic versus conventional.
It's going to be higher for the organic. One of the best places I could refer you to is FinBin at the University of Minnesota, which is their farm records program, where they do separate out organic farms from conventional farms, which would give it to you. I'm not familiar if Wisconsin does any of that.
No, and we have some of those records, which I can certainly share with the class that are based off of our inputs from the Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems trial. Not as nice as what FinBin or University of Minnesota.
Yeah, you could maybe help them with how to connect to the FinBin. The FinBin is the one that is the most comprehensive that I've seen as far as being able to you know distinctly what is the organic versus conventional. So there are, and it's a number of years. It's not just that they started last year collecting this.
And I can send that information out to the whole class, including the short course. One more question online. Do you have an idea of average profit per acre for organic production? Depends on a lot of things.
I'll flip the herring here.
Yeah, that's actually going to be a really individual type thing, dependent on are you borrowed up on your land? Do you have big land expense? You know, and it just depends on where you're getting your fertility. Are you using cover crops? Do you have? I mean, we have farmers that are cheek to jowl to 100,000 cow feedlots in western Kansas, and the feedlot actually provides a composting service for the manure that comes out, and the farmers just have the hull in it. And so that's a component that really lowers your cost of fertility. So the thing about organic is it's such a individualized system that has a lot to do with how each individual farm approaches the aspect of providing fertility, and then the ownership of the farm and its position as far as debt. So it's a difficult one to put an exact figure on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other questions from anywhere else in the room or online?
With say producing organic milk, the feed to the cattle would have to come from an organic certified feed.
Mm-hmm. Whether it be your own farm, your own land, or whether you buy it. Now, Harry's done some work with some of the dairies that do buy their crop.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, we worked closely with a lot of large dairies in Texas that 100% of the feed stock comes right in, from the outside. And these are quite different from, dairies that are the Organic Valley model in, say, western Wisconsin, that you've got 40, 60 cows and you're on 300-400 acres of production, and you're pretty much a self-sufficient on most of your feed. It's all dependent, I guess, particularly on scale. But you're right in that you do have to, that's part of to label it as organic milk, all the feed has to be organic. And of course, it compounds the organic inspection process, because your inspector is going to want to see bill of sales and records that can have a paper trail back to the organic production for the feed grains and the forage they
We're
buy.
not talking a lot about dairy in this class, but 30% of dry matter during the grazing season has to come from pasture. So there may be a shift too with respect to pasture-based contribution to the diet and grazing too. So that, and Dick might be able to talk more about the grazing part of it, but that's another shift.
So in class we happen to have Dick Cates, who is the director of the School for Beginning Dairy and Livestock Farmers, who wants to share some thoughts.
Yes, I wanted to say, first of all, what a wonderful effort you're putting forth here, folks. The Wisconsin School for Beginning Dairy and Livestock Farmers, we're in our 21st year, and we use the same technology. And we have 6 sites across the state and 1 in Maine. And this is forward-thinking. It's important programming from University of Wisconsin. And this is such a timely and valuable topic. I want to just basically address a question that one of the students asked, and it's a very honest question. What if everybody jumps over to the organic side, and we spent all this time touting the economic benefits, and now everybody's jumped on board and the price goes down? It's a very honest and very appropriate question. The only thing I can say is, based on my own farming experience, 25 years ago, my wife and I moved to pasture-based beef and then to grass-fed beef. And every single year, there's probably not a month that goes by that somebody doesn't ask me, oh my God, isn't that price going to go down? And every single year, the price has gone up. What I'm saying is that that's a logical question, but don't leave the money on the table. We've got an opportunity, an economic opportunity. And for young people, jump on it. And if it goes away, it goes away. But meanwhile, you got a rising tide. And so that's been my life's experience, and that's how I would respond to that question.
Great, thank you, Dick. Appreciate that thought. So not seeing any more questions online. And that was a great, rousing end, I think, to today's discussion. So I want to thank John Bobbe and, sorry, what's your name again?
Harry.
And Harry from O-Farm for talking today. And a quick heads up for what's coming up tomorrow. We have Tim Ennis from National Farmers Organization coming in via satellite, via the internet to talk to us to further the conversation that we began today about marketing. John laid down some great groundwork, and tomorrow Tim will dial down into some more of those details. Also, I will be sending out an email later today with information about accessing the archive video from yesterday from Carmen's talk, as well as where to find the video that we'll be recording, that we have recorded today, as well as all those in the future. And that email will also have a link to the survey that I sent out, which many people have responded to, but just want to ask you kindly to respond to that as soon as you can. That's really important for our ability to be able to report on the grant that is funding all of this good work. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in and for being in class. As always, if you have feedback or had technical issues, please get in touch with me through phone or email, and we can get all of those sorted out. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you tomorrow.